This is KPRC 2 News at 6.
Tonight on KPRC 2, a team investigation. We're talking about criminal suspects with violent histories released back onto the streets, only to end up accused of committing even more crimes.
Low bonds or personal bonds given to repeat offenders. And in many cases, what happens when they get out is changing families forever.
Our KPRC 2 Investigates team is going in depth with reports here at 6 o'clock and also tonight at 10. Investigator Robert Arnold leads off our special coverage tonight.
Yes, come here. Come see Mama.
Melanie Infinger wonders what she'll say to her 2-year-old granddaughter, Alexis.
That has been something I replay over in my head all the time.
How do you tell a child her mother was murdered and the person accused of the crime is her father?
I worry about when she starts school. I worry about, what her friends are going to say or, about her mom and her dad.
At 20 years old, Caitlin Rose Guajardo was a burgeoning artist and a doting mother who was pregnant with a second child. Caitlin was married to Alex Guajardo.
Like most women in domestic abuse situations, really believed he was going to change.
When she wound up in the emergency room, Caitlin finally pressed charges.
Ultimately, it cost her life because they let him out.
When Guajardo was charged with attacking Caitlin, he was already out of jail on a pair of bonds. Neither required him to put up money before his release. He was facing charges of a second DWI and running from an accident.
Did she believe he would get out, or did she believe he would stay in?
Oh, we absolutely thought he was staying in.
Even though he was already out on 2 bonds and now charged with assaulting Caitlin, Guajardo was released again on a personal bond. 48 hours later, Caitlin and her unborn child were dead.
How many murders are going to have to take place before we wake up and realize this is not the right path forward?
After reviewing murder cases filed during the last 2 years, KPRC 2 Investigates found 27 cases where a defendant was out on 2 or more bonds at the time they were accused of killing someone. Law enforcement and victims' rights advocates are demanding change.
They've pretty much bared their bones. I'm not going to be a law-abiding citizen. I've repeatedly told you that because I keep getting charged with crimes.
Now, the governor and state senators on both sides of the aisle want to change the law.
We really need to be able to deny bond for violent offenders.
This is terrible public policy. It shouldn't happen, and these judges have got to stop what they're doing.
Another concern is the increasing use of unsecured or personal bonds in felony cases. These bonds don't require defendants to put up money for their release. In 2015, out of all the felony bonds issued, just over 3% were unsecured. By 2020, that number grew to nearly 30%.
I think that there's a new philosophy that people who cannot afford bond are entitled to personal recognizance bond.
Chris Morton is judge of the 230th District Court. He is the only felony court judge who agreed to speak with us on camera.
You had issued the most personal bonds.
Indeed.
Why?
Whenever someone is indigent, cannot afford bond, I must give them a bond they can make.
Morton says the Texas Constitution guarantees defendants the right to bond in most cases, and bond can't be a form of punishment, even when someone is repeatedly charged.
At what point, as a judge, do you go, enough's enough?
Well, the law doesn't allow me to say enough's enough. If a person is accused of a crime and accused of another crime and until they're convicted, they're still must be treated by a judge or by a jury as they're innocent until proven guilty.
Now, Judge Morton does say this is his interpretation of the law and that some of his colleagues may see it differently. The judge also says he has and will revoke someone's bond if they have a violation, but he says prosecutors must first call for a hearing on the matter. Clearly, this is a complicated subject.
At 6 o'clock, investigator Robert Arnold examined the controversial policy highlighting one tragedy that's tied to bond reform.
And tonight, investigator Mario Diaz shows us where some of these murders are happening in Harris County and whether or not judges tied to these cases have anything to say about them.
Police are investigating 4 homicides today. All of them happened before noon.
The man's body found in a ravine.
The victim is a Hispanic male in his late 20s.
homicides in Harris County.
The victim was taken to the hospital where he died.
Highlighting a legal system victims' advocates say is broken.
Investigators are reviewing surveillance video after a man is shot to death in a car.
530 people murdered in Houston and Harris County last year.
The man is dead and a child hurt in a shooting in West Harris County.
Many committed by career criminals.
A man accused of murder in a 2016 killing on Houston's South Side is now facing another murder charge.
His brother got him into it.
Monica and Armando De Leon's 18-year-old son, Macario, was shot and killed in early December after crossing paths with Luis Ibarbo.
I was angry, and I still am.
The De Leons say their son should have never encountered Ibarbo.
I'll never be able to understand life as it was before, and my heart will never be complete.
Not only do they blame Ibarbo, but also Harris County Judge Ramona Franklin.
You all, I am, we are the gatekeepers of justice.
The De Leons say Judge Franklin let the gates of the 338th Criminal Court fly open, granting Ibarbo bond. The 21-year-old's rap sheet includes aggravated robbery with a deadly weapon. His bond was revoked last July at the insistence of prosecutors, but Franklin allowed bond yet again. And by mid-October, he was back on the streets. Weeks later, police say he shot and killed Macario in this Greens Point area parking lot.
The judge has as much blood on her hands just as the guy who pulled the trigger.
Judge Franklin turned down multiple requests for interviews, and she's not the only judge who won't talk about the problem.
I've been in the practice of defense law for 30 years.
Judge Lori Chambers Gray remains silent, too. Out of the 27 cases we identified where investigators say a murder was committed by a suspect out on multiple bonds, Judge Gray handled 4 of them.
Each judge has, the jurisdiction of their court.
Judge Chris Morton of the 230th Court had 1 case out of the 27. He's also the only judge who agreed to be interviewed.
I may disagree with some of my colleagues with the practices they have. I can't say what they're doing is right or wrong. All I can say is what I am doing in my courtroom and what I interpret the law to be.
County Commissioner Rodney Ellis is considered the architect of bail reform in Harris County, designed to address inequities in criminal justice. But the reforms Ellis helped design are now having a disproportionate effect on public safety in his own precinct. Our analysis of 27 homicide cases over the last 2 years involving suspects out on multiple bonds found 12 of those homicides happened in the area Ellis represents.
I know representing one of the poorest precincts in the state. Clearly, criminal justice issues are always a problem.
Is there anything you would change?
Oh, there's a hell of a lot I would change. I'd invest a lot more money in alternatives to just locking people up. But with that, you got to make sure we're safe as well.
State lawmakers want change, too. Senate Bill 532 would prevent judges from giving a defendant a zero cash bond if they're accused of a new offense while already out on another zero cash bond. It also would prevent bonds for felony cases if the suspect already is facing 2 or more other felony charges. But the bill has a long way to go to become law.
The rights here in Texas and in the nation are being denied due process.
Judge Ramona Franklin proclaimed the justice system is failing in Texas. Armando De Leon says she's had a hand in it. Both he and Monica wonder how Judge Franklin can be held accountable for the loss of their son, a child that in their eyes will forever be their baby.
How is the judge going to pay? That's what I want to know.
How can judges operate differently on the bench? Politicians in Austin are trying to get new legislation passed this session. You'll hear from them tomorrow morning on KPRC 2 News Today. As for what Harris County Sheriff Ed Gonzalez and Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo think about bond reform, you can watch a KPRC 2 Investigates web extra right now at click2houston.com/investigates. Mario Diaz, KPRC 2 investigates.
Rage and confusion. That's how families of people murdered have reacted when suspects walk out of jail. And in the past year, the district court judges have been the ones facing scrutiny for setting bond.
That's right. While most defendants have a right to bond, KPRC 2 investigates went looking for answers to find out how much of a say prosecutors have when it comes to bond. And as our Robert Arnold uncovers tonight, in some cases, it's what prosecutors don't do that can lead to a murder defendant's release on bond.
The things I've come to learn about how the system works and doesn't work are both disgusting and shocking.
Paul Castro never asked to be part of the debate over felony bond in Harris County. The decision was made for him when his 17-year-old son David was murdered after an Astros game in July.
What did you think would happen in terms of bond?
The hope was the system would keep them locked up.
Judges are often criticized for setting any kind of bond or setting a bond that the public considers too low. But what we wanted to know, what is the prosecutor's role in this process? More specifically, what impact can the prosecutor have on the setting of bond? KPRC 2 Investigates dug into the court records of all murder and capital murder cases where bond was set this year. That's 257 cases. In at least 10% of these cases, prosecutors did not appear to fight the bond set by the judge. We found judges leaving notes like prosecution didn't ask for a higher bond, state never asked to raise bond, or state didn't move forward with bail motion. Then there's the case of 34-year-old Gerald Wayne Williams, who was charged with David Castro's murder.
When I heard that his accused murderer was granted bond, it was, first it was enraging.
A magistrate initially set Williams' bond at $350,000. Prosecutors asked to deny bond, but court records show prosecutors abandoned their motion, instead asking for a $500,000 bond. Judge Mark Brown wrote, without a hearing or evidence to support their request, he had no discretion to deny bail and no legal justification to change the original amount.
He's wrong. He had legal recourse.
We asked to speak with District Attorney Kim Ogg. Instead, Prosecutor Joanne Musick, who did not handle Williams' case, answered our questions.
If he believes the bond to be insufficient, he himself may sua sponte on his own raise that bond to a higher level.
Why would you ask for bail and not present any evidence to support what you're requesting?
And I can't speak to the particulars in that case. I can tell you that Judge Mark Brown, as any judge, has a right to determine for himself, him or herself, regardless of any evidence presented, if bail is sufficient or not.
But isn't that a cop-out? You go, oh, well, it's just the judge. Our hands are tied at this point.
I'm not saying our hands are tied. I'm saying we took a strategic position to not present evidence at that moment.
How much impact can a prosecutor have on seeing a higher bond instituted?
Considerable. To have a higher bond instituted really is coming all from the prosecutor.
Catherine Evans has been a prosecutor and a judge. She's now a defense attorney. She says while ultimately judges decide bond, many look to the prosecution and defense to provide information that will help form that decision.
Bonds cannot be used as an instrument of oppression. What that means in a given situation, though, is very much open for interpretation.
And former Judge George Powell, who is now a defense attorney, adds most bonds are set by magistrates after a person is arrested.
You're charged in the 248th District Court with the first-degree felony offense of murder, sir.
Once that case gets to the trial court, if the prosecution doesn't ask for a hearing to change or deny bond,
in that event, the judge is going to leave it alone, typically, and there may be people upset because the judge didn't make a decision in that case.
When do you fight for these things?
When we feel it is so far removed from sufficient, then we will add the extra resources and time to continue fighting.
And it's answers like that that leave family members like Paul Castro feeling confused and angry about how bail is set in Harris County.
I don't feel like I have enough information anymore to have anything other than a mild opinion. What I do know is, my son is dead and the person accused of killing him is on the street.
So what is a high or low bond? The term is debatable and subjective. The DA's office has no written policy on bail other than each case is viewed individually based on the evidence. The DA's office also says it has to balance its backlog with dedicating prosecutors to fighting bail issues. You'll find this story plus more of our reporting on bail-related issues right now on click2houston.com. Robert Arnold, KPRC 2 Investigates.